Indonesia's president has urged Asian nations to agree a code of conduct for disputes in South China Sea. Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono was addressing foreign ministers as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, gathered in Bali for a 5-day summit. Talks are expected to focus on the territorial dispute taking place over parts of the South China Sea. China claims huge areas of the sea and 2 island chains, but its claims overlap with those of other nations. The president said in his keynote speech to foreign ministers, "We need to finalize those long overdue guidelines because we need to get moving to the next phase." He continued that we need to send a strong signal to the world that the future of the South China Sea is a predictable, manageable, and optimistic one. Correspondents said tensions over the South China Sea are likely to overshadow the summit. China, Vietnam, and Taiwan all claim sovereignty over huge areas of the sea, including the Paracel and Spratly Island groups. The Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei also claim overlapping areas of territory. The region has vital shipping routes as well as vast reserves of oil and gas. The meeting in Bali culminates on Saturday with talks on regional security, which will include China, Japan, and the U.S. U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is among those due to attend. The group is also expected to discuss the recent border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia, as well as to decide whether Burma should get the ASEAN chair in 2014. Human rights groups say letting Burma head the grouping would be an embarrassment for the region. The BBC's Karishma Waswani says the way in which ASEAN manages these challenges will be seen as an indication of just how effective and relevant ASEAN is.
With more than 3,000 democracy supporters led by Aung San Suu Kyi marched in Myanmar's biggest city in honor of her father, the nation's independence hero, on Tuesday. The short march from the headquarters of Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy to the Martyrs' Mausoleum was the biggest public demonstration since 2007, when the military junta launched a bloody crackdown on pro-democracy protesters. Suu Kyi earlier attended the government ceremony at the Mausoleum for Martyrs' Day, which marks the anniversary of the 1947 assassination of General Aung San and colleagues during a cabinet meeting shortly after Britain agreed to grant independence to what was then known as Burma. It was the first time in 9 years that 66-year-old Suu Kyi attended the ceremony. She had been under her most recent stint of house arrest from May 2003 until last November. Suu Kyi's prestige as Aung San's daughter has long vexed the country's military rulers, who ceded power early this year to an elected but army-backed government. The state-controlled press, which used to carry lengthy tributes to the nation's founding father, stopped such coverage years ago. The Martyrs' Day ceremony used to be attended by the Prime Minister, then later by the Home Minister, but now Yangon's mayor is the highest-ranking official to take part. It also urged to be a tradition for factories to blow their sirens and public activity to stop for a minute in memory of the martyrs. On Tuesday, in the vicinity of the march, the tradition was revived and traffic nearby stopped at 10:37 a.m., the time of the 1947 attack, for a minute of silence. Tuesday's official ceremony was held under tight security. At least 9 truckloads of riot police carrying batons and shields were deployed near the mausoleum, and roadblocks were set up along the route to the monument. Reporters entering the mausoleum were not allowed to carry phones and bags. After the official ceremony, a private Martyrs' Day event was held at Suu Kyi's party headquarters. Veteran politicians, students, activists, party members, supporters, and diplomats from US, British, Australian, German, and France were among those attending. Following that event, Suu Kyi and other party leaders drove back to the mausoleum, followed by more than 3,000 supporters. Police did not interfere with them, though they were forced to leave their bags at the checkpoints. The group issued a statement calling on the government to hold meaningful political dialogue towards national reconciliation and to unconditionally release all the political prisoners. Myanmar's first civilian government since 1962 took control at the end of March after an election last November, but critics charge the change is simply cosmetic and the army will continue to hold supreme political power. Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, which won elections in 1988 but was blocked from taking power by the military, boycotted the poll, claiming it was held under unfair conditions.
U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said on Tuesday that the United States was encouraged by the ongoing talks between nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan and promised to give full support to India's efforts to protect itself from insurgents. Clinton's visit to India came less than a week after a triple bombing killed 20 people in India's financial capital, Mumbai, the worst strike in the country since 10 Pakistan-based gunmen rampaged through the city in 2008. Though India has not blamed Pakistan for last week's attack, it has accused its neighbor for harboring violent extremist groups responsible for other attacks in India and of not doing enough to crack down on those responsible for the 2008 Mumbai siege. Clinton said, "We think this is the most promising approach to encourage both sides, referring to India and Pakistan, to build more confidence between them and to work to implement the kinds of steps that will demonstrate the improved atmosphere." For their part, U.S. officials fear Pakistan is not fully committed to combating radical plots such as the failed 2010 Times Square bombing in New York. She said, "We have made it clear to the Pakistani government that confronting violent extremists of all sorts is in its interest." India recently resumed peace talks with Pakistan that broke off following the 2008 Mumbai siege, and the two countries' foreign ministers are expected to meet next week. The U.S. is eager for the fragile talks to pick up steam, in part to allow Pakistan to focus its forces on the chaotic Afghan border. Clinton assured India of U.S. support in the fight against insurgents. Her meeting with top Indian officials on Tuesday focused on fighting insurgency, the U.S. withdrawal plans from Afghanistan, and ways to broaden economic and security ties between the United States and India. Clinton's trip is part of a new round of U.S.-India strategic dialogue established last year to deepen ties between the world's oldest and largest democracies. Clinton also called for a swift resolution for the dispute over investments in nuclear energy, calling on India to ratify by the end of the year the Convention on Supplementary Compensation for Nuclear Damage and to adapt its liability laws to conform with the treaty. She added that we would encourage engagement with the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure that the liability regime that India adopts by law fully conforms with the international requirements under the convention. The U.S. views India's nuclear liability law as too stringent on nuclear plant suppliers, making it difficult for private U.S. companies to compete against state-owned companies in India's multi-billion-dollar nuclear reactor market. Once frosty relations between India and the United States have warmed considerably in recent years, as Washington has looked to India as stable ally in the turbulent South Asia region and its growing economy as a valuable market for U.S. goods.
From India now, let's move to the UK, as according to British police, there is no evidence of outside involvement in the death of phone hacking whistleblower Sean Hoare. Hertfordshire police said an autopsy on Hoare confirmed no evidence of third-party involvement and the death is non-suspicious. Hoare, in his mid-40s, also was the first journalist to openly say that his former friend and editor at the News of the World, Andy Coulson, knew about the tabloid's widespread use of phone hacking. Coulson links the scandal to Prime Minister David Cameron, who he worked for as communications chief. Hoare's death at his home this week added another tragic twist to the scandal, which has forced the paper's closure, brought down senior police officials, and threatened to engulf the rest of Rupert Murdoch's media empire. Detectives hope toxicology tests will solve the riddle of Hoare's death. In a related stories, a protester splattered a Rupert Murdoch with white foam in a foil pie dish on Tuesday, interrupting a dramatic hearing in which the media barn told British lawmakers that he was not responsible for a phone hacking scandal that has rocketed his global empire. After more than 2 hours of testimony, a man in a plaid shirt appeared to run towards Murdoch before being pushed away by several people and struck by Murdoch's wife, Wendy Deng. Police in the back of the committee room were holding an apparently handcuffed man with white foam covering his face and shirt. The foam also appeared to have hit Murdoch's suit. However, the hearing resumed after a short break. Media reports identified the protester as Johnny Marbles, a British comedian. Just before the attack, he wrote on his Twitter feed that it is a far better thing that I do now than I have ever done before at Splat, a slightly altered quotation from the last sentence of Charles Dickens' novel A Tale of Two Cities.
Japan's government is set to suspend all cattle shipments from Fukushima as concerns over radiation-tainted beef escalate. Senior Vice Health Minister Kohei Osuga said beef from surrounding areas may also be affected. It comes after 136 cows were found to have consumed feed affected by radioactive cesium. This is the latest health scare linked to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant damaged by the March 11 earthquake. Increasing numbers of cows have been found to have consumed rice straw containing high levels of radioactive cesium. The straw was harvested from rice paddies in Fukushima Prefecture after the devastating earthquake and tsunami knocked out critical cooling systems at the local nuclear plant, leading to a meltdown. There have been no fatalities as a result of the crisis at Fukushima. However, more than 1,500 people died in the twin natural disaster, and more than 5,000 are still missing. Distributors across the country have bought meat from exported cows, and some of it could have already reached consumers. The major supermarket chain Aeon said that hundreds of kilos of the beef has been sold at 14 of its stores in Tokyo and the surrounding areas. The retailers said it would start to check beef shipments from all areas for contamination. The government has also acknowledged that the problem could be wider than just Fukushima. The initial discovery of contaminated beef was traced back to the farms near the Fukushima power plant, but more recent discoveries are from farms as far as 100 kilometers away. However, Farm Ministry officials said that consuming the beef a few times would not pose a health risk, despite radiation levels several times the national limit. Shipments of certain vegetables from areas near the plant had already been halted due to high radiation levels.
When we come back, we have, as usual, Meet the Editors and Around Asia by Asia News Network after the break.